Part of Marcel Detienne's essay on the truth and, who had access to the truth. He says for a very long time it wasn't believed that everyone had equal access to the truth. How's that? Well, we've come into an age where we all have, physics and chemistry that we all can refer to as some baseline of truth that is, accessible to all of us. But it wasn't always the case. Okay, no, I get that. But so who had access to the truth? Well, Detienne says, that there were, three basic figures, within society who were believed to have access to the truth. And it was the poet, the priest, and the king. The poet, the priest, and the king. Okay, no, I kind of get that, but go ahead. Right, of course, the poets had access to the truth, as, storytellers, so to speak. As they seem to have a way, of observing things, getting a certain point of view and then being able to elucidate that point of view, with the perfect wording, such that people are like, oh, yes, he quite nailed it. And, their ability to, recount the stories of old, it seemed, they couldn't possibly have all of this in their memory with such detail, that they must be accessing, some greater truth as they share their poetry and stories. Okay, and what about the priest and the king? Well, of course, the priest has access to the truth through their connection to the divine. Some type of divine truth was, granted to them, of course. Yeah, and I get that. And what about the king? Well, the king's truth was, basically just, efficacy of speech, so to speak. So, the king says there will be, a boat harbor in the East Bay, next year. And sure enough, there's the boat harbor in the East Bay. So, whatever the king says, is of course quite true as well. Okay, yeah, no, I'm kind of getting it. The poet, the priest, and the king all could see the truth. And what, the rest of us were just kind of left here to guess at, why the sky is blue, kind of thing. Quite right. Okay, so how did we all start to get access to the truth? Well, again, the process comes through the military, as they would see that on the battlefield, it wasn't, the king's decree that they would win the battle that actually won the day, or, the prayers of the priest that got them through, or, the poet's recounting of their bravery, but it was instead, the strike of the eye of the field commanders, their strategies and tactics, their plans, it seemed that they as well were able to access some sort of truth and speak the truth. Yeah, okay, I can see that. So then it became what, the poet, the priest, the king, and then that's the field commander. Right, and in recognizing, well, the field commander could have been any of us, and interacting with that, where it's recognize that the field commander would be asking some of his troops, for advice and for their point of view as well. That it wasn't so isolated to just the skilled poet in his own domain, or the priest's access to the divine, which he could not share with you, or of course the king cannot share the throne with you, type thing. So it became that all of us now had access to the truth. Okay. Right, and in this way, the truth was thought of as, being on a spectrum of having all the points of view and all the data, and on the other side of the spectrum would be just an absolute oblivion of points of view and data. So it wasn't such an absolute right and wrong, true and false, as we think of things now. Yeah, that's definitely how we think of it now, right? Like, somebody's got to be right, somebody's got to be wrong, things are true and false, and there's really no room to move, right? Right, and we've lost something, in going to such, absolute extremes with our idea of the truth now. And there's a wonderful tidbit in a lovely show where one of the characters is making exactly this point. His friend is saying, true and false, right and wrong are absolutes, they're not subject to gradation, kind of thing. And his friend says, well, of course they are, it's a little bit wrong to call a tomato a vegetable, but it's a lot wrong to call a tomato a suspension bridge. Yeah, okay, good point. So, it's an interesting, lineage of access to the world that we live in, to think that there was a time when people didn't believe that they could know anything true and that they had to go to other sources to even discover anything, true and false in the world, to discover, what reality is. And I think it's important to keep in mind, though, that now that we, do have, physics and chemistry and science and whatnot, that does not mean, that we have absolute access and that whoever's right is simply right and someone else must be absolutely wrong, and we grant each other, that everyone has a valid point of view, and some valid explanation, however bizarre it may sound to us, as, science clearly proves, that sometimes the most bizarre ideas, are actually correct. Right, yeah, guys like Einstein certainly showed us that, didn't they? Quite right, and boy, was he quite the goof, If you were to think about him and think, oh, gosh, time and space warping around, clearly this fellow's wrong, toss him right out the door. Yeah, I get your point. So, yeah, we should all be masters of a new truth, right? Quite right. Yeah, masters of the new truth.